Alright, hey everyone, it's LS, and this is going to be another Speed VOD review, Cloud9 versus Gen.G esports. We are jumping into the draft, and right off the bat, Tom Kench and Lissandra being banned away, followed up by Zaya. And now Gen.G banning away Kaisa, Kindred, and we'll see what the final ban is from Gen.G esports. Looks like it's going to be a Nocturne. Cloud9 first picking Alistar. I find that a little bit weird. I don't think that that is a champion that needs as much priority as some other champs in the game. I like that Gen.G instantly snaps the Aatrox and the Taliyah. I think those are two of the strongest picks definitely in the game. Taliyah is actually a little bit underutilized, I feel like, lately, and in recent months even, inside of the jungle. Looks like Cloud9 going to handshake the response with Urgot. This has been one of the most common top lane matchups that we've been experiencing in the meta lately. I do think that Aatrox is the superior to pick because I think that he's more flexible, and I also think that he does not slow down nearly as hard as Urgot. Urgot, I think, tends to slow down after about 2 items. I think that Aatrox does not slow down almost ever. Maybe you could make an argument that Aatrox slows down at a 6th item, but beyond that, not really too much. Tristana is really strange. I don't understand why Cloud9 is going for a Tristana pick. And it looks like Rakan now being locked in by Gen.G esports. Zaya is already banned away. A little bit surprised that we didn't just see an ADC locked in here. I wouldn't be too surprised to see Cloud9 actually just try to pinch the ADC pool. Xin Zhao being banned away by Gen.G. Xin Zhao is one of the better picks against Taliyah. I also don't think that... I don't know. If you're going to pick Tristana, it's not a priority pick. It's not something that's going to be banned away. I think that you can definitely just rotate her in later. So it really depends here. Why do they want the Tristana? Varus now being banned away. They should probably ban away another ADC. Okay, they actually ban away Ezreal. Taliyah's weakness is champions that can semi-match her in terms of mobility, but they can also bring the fight to her very well. Also champions that scale fairly well, and champions that have good amounts of dive or engage that she can't reliably get away from. So they did pinch ADCs, and then Gen.G actually goes for Lucian. So looks like Gen.G is actually looking for maybe some sort of lane kingdom. They have 2 extremely powerful laners right now in the Aatrox and the Lucian and the Rakan. And it looks like Aatrox actually going to be flexed into mid lane to respond to the Galio, and it's going to be a Poppy up in top lane. And I guess Poppy's actually really interesting against Urgot. So let's just pause really quick and talk about the team composition. So when you're Jarvan, one of the things here is that obviously you're going to be looking for kills onto Urgot. It's going to be extremely difficult for a blue side Jarvan to do anything to a red side Poppy, and then obviously in bottom lane Tristana is going to need time to scale up, and then you have a blue side Jarvan that's going to be trying to gank bottom lane when Tristana is going to be very vulnerable, and it's likely that Gen.G is going to have priority. So I think Blabber actually has his work cut out for him, and I think that the real point of Jarvan comes inside of the mid game once Galio has level 6. So I don't really expect to see Jarvan able to do anything against Taliyah unless Gen.G is making a lot of mistakes. On the flip side, though, Taliyah actually has a lot of utility. If Licorice actually ends up pushing in Cuvée too much, then Haru actually has incentive to play on the top left-hand side of the map and play around Crown and Cuvée. But likewise, Haru can also just play river-centric on both sides of the river, play around mid lane, and then play around his wraiths and the opponent's wraiths, and just constantly bounce between these 2 areas inside of this circle. And if he ends up doing that and keeps constant tabs on Blabber, Crown and Ruler should be able to lane kingdom mid and bottom lane, and then Haru should actually be able to pull ahead of Blabber by generating himself an XP lead and a gold lead. The other scary thing, I think, for Cloud9 is they have an extremely explosive 1-item and 2-item spike across all of their champions due to the nature of their team composition and the combos which is present inside of it. Obviously, I don't really have to talk too much about Jarvan Galio. It's one of the most common Galio combos that was just a menace in competitive play historically. On the flip, though, Aatrox does not slow down. Taliyah does not slow down. Poppy does not really... I mean, Poppy becomes the same champion, but against this team composition, because Tristana is going to be the only reliable enough champion to deal damage to the Poppy, the other champions are too weak, and so because of that, I feel like Poppy gets like the wiggle with the check mark, where Poppy doesn't really slow down. Lucian will slow down, but again, because he's backed up by so many strong champions, these four are just such a nightmare against Cloud9. Anything beyond 2 items, Gen.G is going to just start to pull away with the game. And then when we think about the later stage team fights around the 25-minute mark to 30-minute mark and what it means for Cloud9 if they're pushed inside of their blue side jungle and whatnot, this is the rectangle or the square that I often talk about the blue teams being able to make use of when trying to prevent the enemy team from getting to the Baron and allowing themselves more time to scale up and whatnot. The problem with this is obviously the Taliyah wall. Taliyah is very good at suffocating people and pinching them inside of their jungle. Yes, Blabber and Jensen do have ways of cracking into the river and stopping any sort of Baron attempt, but with Crown on the Aatrox and then obviously Poppy as well, I feel like they actually have quite a lot of mobility, especially once Aatrox gets to his level 13. He becomes quite a menace and such a nightmare to actually deal with. So I feel like Cloud9 has to end this game around 2 items. They have to get enough of an advantage because any point after that, Gen.G has luxury to sit back. And if Cloud9 also, they don't have that good of a way of cracking turrets without RNGing Mountain Drakes, and they also have an extremely heavy reliance on Baron. The problem is that if they're trying to posture around Baron, Gen.G's team composition is actually quite nice at peeling backwards and turtling inside of their red side jungle, the entrance into the Wraiths, and then obviously the red buff is right here. This is a very difficult area for Gen.G to actually crack into, even with a Jarvan EQ followed up by a Galio ultimate, and so Gen.G has luxury to bounce between this point and then obviously the mid-tier 1 turret and constantly stabilize it. Alright, so we're going to get into the game. Is this times 2? It's 1.5. AC0S, what you're saying makes no sense. Galio J4, Tristana cannot just nullify Taliyah. That makes absolutely no sense. You can't just dive onto Taliyah and assume that Aatrox and Poppy are doing no response. And for Tristana to be in range, that means that Tristana is then vulnerable to Taliyah herself, Aatrox, and Lucian. C9 gets outdrafted in the sense that their team composition is one-dimensional, and it does not have as much flexibility as Gen.G's. Gen.G's is so flexible. They can go into split pushes, they can go into hyper-aggressive mid-game transition, they can go into scaling, they can go into turtle mode, even though they don't have a lot of wave clear. It's backed up by the fact that Cloud9 doesn't actually have that good of a team composition for diving turrets, which you might think, well, that's very weird. They have Jarvan Galio, what do you mean they can't dive turrets? Well, yes, but Gen.G has Aatrox and Poppy, so in addition to that, they also have Taliyah with the worked ground and everything like that, so it's not as cut and dry as it normally should be. If Poppy and Taliyah were not on the team and you changed those junglers up to like Jinzhao and then some other random top laner, yes, Cloud9 would actually have very good turret diving capabilities, but with the way that the 2 team comps are and then also the colors, it's not like that. Oh, sorry. Okay. Infernal Drake is the first dragon in the game. Unfortunately for Cloud9, due to how their champions itemize, it's not as important for them as it is for Gen.G. If Gen.G can get a hold of that for Lucian, Aatrox, and Taliyah, that's a very, very big pickup. So for Cloud9, it's more about denying it. Looks like Jensen and Blabber want to make some sort of a play here against Crown. And I think it's actually, yeah, they're going to actually manage to pick up a kill. and Jensen actually ends up going down too. So unfortunately for them, that's not as good as it could be. It is important to note that Jensen does have the teleport, so I don't know why Blabber was actually hitting some of the minions. That seems really strange. And now Talia in mid lane, looks like she's trying to hold it, but Jensen's going to be able to crash that wave in, and Crown is trying his best to get back into the lane. So now, at this point, what you have to think to yourself is, okay, Blabber no longer has flash. Bottom lane is fine. Mid lane is likely going to be fine now. Aatrox does have to be a little bit more afraid, even though Blabber doesn't have flash, because if Galio just manages to land one of his taunts with an E knockup, then Crown can instantly go down. So what I'm assuming is that we should expect to see Haru actually change gears into a match counter gank party, and just seeing that over and over and over while he just power farms, because he can farm much harder than Blabber. And if he just plays defensive at this point, I think that's his best chance at salvaging the situation and continuing to try to get his team ahead. Okay. So Licorice is just perma-shoving in Cube. And Haru just having that river control. I don't think that he actually needs to go aggressive or do anything offensive. Looks like Cube is actually teleporting back to top, so I don't think that we're actually going to see any sort of plays made around the Infernal Drake, although it is something that I would like to see. So far, Cloud9 is actually doing okay. Wow, there's a lot of focus around this mid lane. This is that counter match gank that I was talking about, and fortunately for them, Core JJ is also here as well. So Cloud9 putting a lot of attention into trying to do something to Crown, and really good play by Gen.G. They have pretty good vision control on right-hand side, and I really like how Haru is playing it with the transition. I think that's very correct. I don't know what Blabber... I mean, I guess Blabber's just not expecting... he's not expecting Core JJ to be there. And so that's actually a really, really big tempo swing for Cloud9 to lose that mid-engage there. Because Jarvan ends up expending his ultimate, and now it means that Crown is going to be able to just have a free lane for a little while, and so there's a lot of pressure being reduced. Jensen still does have his ultimate, though, so you have to keep that in mind. Blabber trying to clear out some vision in the right-hand side. And he's actually keeping up and actually even ahead of Haru right now in the CS department. Well, I guess they're even right now, but across the board, Cloud9's actually fine. So they still have their mid-game explosiveness available to them with the combos and the synergy. No, there's not a way to stop the clicking. It's the Korean player behind me. Alright, and so now Infernal Drake is something that has to be a very big consideration for both teams. Any sort of a misstep in any lane, really like Haru again, another counter gank. And they end up actually getting Blabber's flash. I was just going to say fatch. I don't know what the hell I was even trying to say. And so now Infernal Drake is definitely on the table. So Sneaky and Zazel are getting shoved in here. I really like what Licorice is doing. It looks like he's pathing down. I don't know if it's just that he's going for the Scuttle Crab, but you can see that Haru now is going to be able to get the Infernal Drake off the mistake that Cloud9 made in mid. And that's really, really concerning. Next Drake that is coming up is going to be the Cloud Drake. So when you look at what team does that benefit more, I would say that it probably benefits Gen.G a little bit more because they have the option to do the split push type stuff. With the Aatrox, it helps the Aatrox move around the map more, and then obviously Poppy and Talia as well. Although Cloud9 can definitely benefit from it just as much. Okay. Mid lane is going to soon start hitting a point where Aatrox will just start taking over. And we can see that Zeyzal is actually here as well. It looks like they're going to be able to at least get the ultimate out of Crown. It did come at the expense of using the Ignite, so I do think that in the end that's probably actually a win for Crown, because I think that he is less reliant on summoners than the opponents are, especially due to the nature of their team comp and how combo reliant they are. Oh, I don't know what's going on with the screen. Sorry. Yeah, Zeyzal also flashed. So right now Sneaky is doing okay down in bottom lane. He has that one item. And so we're still waiting to see Sparks fly. Nothing's really going on. And I think that Cloud9 actually can't allow the game to continue moving at such a slow pace. Jensen's doing a very good job in the mid lane, obviously, with the CS lead, although he has received a lot of assistance, even though Haru has had some quite nice counter ganks. And Jensen's probably just going to get out of here really quick. Yep. Some trades happening again down in bottom. Looks like Blabber and Licorice want to pick up the Rift Herald. So everything's actually looking quite fine right now for Cloud9. All that we're really looking at is the mini-map right now. I'm just asking ourselves what is all the teams going to do. Really bizarre to me how Cloud9 hits their spikes faster, but then don't try to orchestrate anything with it. And this probably means that Lucian's going to finally be able to get his recall into the Blade of the Ruin King. Atrox is going to be able to get his Black Cleaver. Or is he not going Black Cleaver? He has the Warhammer, so I guess that his build's actually going to be slightly delayed. He manages to pull Jensen in, but it doesn't really matter. He can't really continue out the trade. This is a very, very slow early game, which is not something that I would have expected from Cloud9's team composition. For 13 minutes, for them not to... Okay, well, it looks like we're going to have our first instance of a fight here. And so Cloud actually goes down immediately. And so when he goes down immediately, Licorice actually came in via the teleport. Poppy's still up in top lane. I like the fact that they are summoning the Rift Herald. What's the interaction here? Oh, Herald just goes in suicide. So that's actually a really good play by Haru. And it's definitely going to save them the mid turret, at least for a little while. And Cloud9 is not committing to getting this turret, and they don't really need to because Tristan is down bottom them. And you see Cuvée now trying to run up into mid. Now Blabber backs off, and it looks like he's just farming some of his camps. It's actually really, really good tempo by Cloud9. Tristana going... Alright, I don't know what Jensen's doing. What? Why is he in the middle of the lane? Like, so Tristana's resetting, Urgot's going back up into top lane to reset. There's no real objective on the map. He doesn't need to be in front of the turret. I understand that, like, he wants to recall and maybe he wants to get the cannon, but he didn't need to do it at this point in time. Actually, because it's a cannon, he's even actually incentivized to recall sooner. Because the melee minion will go into the turret, it'll take 3 shots, then the cannon goes into the turret, and Jensen should reliably be able to get back. And if he's not able to reliably get back, it still doesn't really matter because they just went out so hard. And now Ruler down in bottom lane, Jensen being dead, not having the Galio ultimate available. This means Gen.G is going to be able to actually pick up first turret of the game. And that's something that's really, really heartbreaking for Cloud9 because they should have been able to get the first turret of the game. This also allows Atrox a lot of breathing room and a lot of tempo control in mid lane, and it looks like Gen.G is actually just going to pick up the Cloud Drake immediately. And I think that this is fine because they're not losing out on tempo anywhere because you can see where Urgot has the lane up in top. And now at this point, Talia can just go back into her jungle and farm her camps if she very so pleases, depending on what Tristana and Alistar want to do in bottom. It looks like Ruler wants to make sure that the bottom lane goes dark for at least a minute. You can see that he's constantly advancing up forward with Core JJ, and he's going to eat that final minion wave. What this will end up doing is that the wave that comes out of the Nexus will take about a minute to crash into the turret, and it gives Gen.G a lot of breathing room because it makes it so that Tristana can't walk up in the lane and escort her own minions into the turret and threaten to capture bottom lane tier 1 turret. And so by the time it would take her to get to the bottom tier 1 turret, Gen.G would already be able to respond by rotating Lucian up to top lane. So watch the speed at which Tristana and Lucian arrive at each other's lanes. The problem here now is that Tristana gets to the turret around the same time Poppy does, but Urgot's behind on tempo. So no matter what, Cloud9's always playing catch up right now, and they're behind about 45 seconds. Now Cloud9 in mid lane, they're going to be able to pick up the mid tier 1 turret. So even though the gold deficit is only 1k, you do have to remember that Gen.G's champions function better with gold. So they are the scaling composition and they have the Infernal Drake. So just remember that when you're looking at the gold gap. So it's a little bit misleading. It's actually bigger than what it's suggesting. And now Gen.G looking like they want to set up and make a play in mid lane. Red buff is up, but nothing else really up too much. Zazel definitely just going to go down immediately. So he just gets eviscerated completely. And then Jensen in mid lane, just going to be by himself. Cloud9 is not functioning with any vision. You just look at the vision around the map and the stranglehold that Gen.G is putting on them. So I feel like if Cloud9 was against a weaker team, their team composition would have been able to make a lot more things happen in the early into mid transition especially. But I think that because they were facing resistance and the counter ganks were being executed as well as they were by Gen.G, it was making it very difficult for Cloud9 to get anything rolling. And now as we move into the mid game, I feel like their map movements are extremely sloppy, and it's what I remember from watching the games in NA towards the end of NALCS and before the end of just Summer Split in total with like playoffs and everything. So it looks extremely similar, at least in that regard. And so now they have the wave up and top. It looks like they're going to rotate Tristana to try to take it. And at this point, this is probably where Gen.G should actually let top tier 1 turret die in exchange for having 5 members around mid tier 1 turret, and then trying to get the tier 1 turret away from Galio. That would most likely just be best. So if you can actually allow Tristana to take the pawn up in top lane, then it would not be that bad. But instead, they actually just rotate Crown up there, and it doesn't actually look like Cloud9 wanted to keep Sneaky going up. And you can see that this is actually kind of what Cloud9 wants, but the angles are just way too bad. They're handshaking a fight that they should never handshake in a million years. Let's just rewind this really quick. Look at how out of position everyone is. Sneaky is not in any position to do anything. You see Blabber, he just gets caught up completely. So they're not even actually using the J4 Galio combo. They just use Galio's ultimate for nothing. Licorice is really late to the fight, and this is just a complete disaster where they're being extremely impatient. They had so much time on their hands. They had 40 seconds for a goddamn Ocean Drake coming up. And what is Cloud9 saying? They're like, you know what? We need to take this fight even though we're out of position. They were looking for something that they didn't need to be looking for because they had 2 lanes in such a good spot that they could have postured for longer and danced until the opponent got exhausted. Because sometimes that's what you have to do in pro play. Sometimes you have to acknowledge that, okay, both teams are going to go up like 1k gold a minute, right? And you're just going to dance back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. And eventually someone's going to misstep during this dance. And it might take a minute and a half. But if that misstep suddenly makes it so that a 60-40 becomes an 80-20, right? That's what you have to do. You just have to dance until the opponent gets fatigued and makes a mistake. Because again, remember, you're juggling 5 people's team compositions and people are on different pages and whatnot. And it's something that you have to do. You don't just decide, hey, we want to do this, we're gonna do it. You have to assess the situation and then see if it's actually a viable time to try to make this happen. And I think that given the position that Licorice was currently in and where Sneaky was and where the members of Gen.G were, I mean, you just look at this. They don't actually have enough intel for what they're trying to do. Blabber goes in on Cuvée, which is not the target that you want to be going on. Look at how out of position Jensen is. And then the fact that, again, Blabberfish is already committed on all of his cooldowns. They didn't have the intel to make this play, which is why they needed to dance a little bit longer. Because they are so dependent on making sure that they hit their combos and they hit them clean so that they can just delete someone from Gen.G and then win out, and Sneaky just carries the fight from the backline. But in order to do that, you have to be willing to dance and wait for Gen.G to make an error in their movements. And then again, because they had Urgot pushing in bottom, you need to wait for him to get to the turret. Because if we just rewind this a little bit, right? Let's just take this back right now. Now let's just say that Blabber does not go into the brush. Okay, and he doesn't try to do any of this. You see, Crown is tied up in top lane. He's going to take about 10 seconds to CS this wave and then begin moving down. There's a Scuttle Crab that's coming up, and then there's a Shit Drake coming up. If Urgot just eats this wave, crashes it into the turret, eventually Ruler's going to CS this wave, and then Ruler's going to go down into bottom lane. Ruler can't just go down into bottom lane like this, because if Urgot ends up coming up like this and going like this, now suddenly they have to move around like this. This then means that Urgot can come in here, and then eventually the next minion wave that comes out of the Nexus can be utilized by Cloud9, and they can look to get the top tier 1 turret. They can then get proper vision control around the red-hand side jungle, and then look for a proper dance, and then execute the Jarvan and Galio combo, followed up with the Alistar, and then fight front to back, and allow Tristana to do her thing. Even though it's still going to be difficult for them, it's a lot better than this impulsiveness and recklessness that they just displayed in this team fight. I can't live stream Worlds reviews. Twitch chat, Riot did not give me permission. I've been contacted by 2 NA teams. I don't know what will happen though. So now at this point, Gen.G is just so far ahead. This is where the game starts to get a little bit boring for me, because I find it difficult to be excited about a scaling comp up 6k gold backed with an Infernal Drake and having a Baron against a team composition that is extremely reliant on combos, lacking some of their summoner spells. So I don't know about you, but it's like, imagine being a straight male trying to get it up for a guy, okay? It just doesn't work like that. Snaky just ends up going down immediately, and Snaky is actually the one champion on their team that they need the most. And I think that's probably actually just going to be it. I think that Gen.G's team composition is too strong, and they just have way too much of an advantage, so it just looks like they're pushing in. They say that, you know, the time is now. So Cloud9 was actually playing really well for a short period of time. Like, they were playing clean for the laning phase portion, but the way that they couldn't look to make things happen or fight back against the style that Haru was playing, I mean, it was very obvious that Haru would have to transition into a counter gank and a defensive jungle style that would just be catered around escorting his laners into the mid game. But the fact that Zeyzal and Blabber couldn't actually orchestrate anything beyond what they did is concerning, because I almost know that if Cloud9 were against a weaker team and they were able to have much better lane kingdoms, Jensen would get much further ahead, and then he would be able to transition that lead into bottom lane a lot easier. And I think that one of the main problems there is that Cloud9's not used to having to find ways to make those plays happen when they don't have as much resources due to the advantages that they can maybe accumulate on their own from bottom lane laning phase and maybe mid lane laning phase in and of itself. And so I think that was really the real problem. Gen.G actually performed basically up to my expectations. Not too flashy, although I was impressed with Haru's jungling, or the transition of it. I think that Gen.G outplayed them in the later stages of the game, even though they were making some slight macro errors that required Cloud9 to make mistakes. Cloud9 definitely did make them, and then I think that Cloud9's vision control in the mid stage of the game was also very, very, very poor. So that's pretty much it. It doesn't really mean too much. I do think that Cloud9 at least looked a little bit, not as clean as G2. G2 still has been the best performing Western team that I've seen at the tournament. But I think that Cloud9, well, it's hard for me to say actually if Cloud9 looked cleaner than Fnatic in this game versus Fnatic's game. I think that Fnatic actually looked a little bit cleaner because they were working, they were in an uphill battle from the very start, and they fell really far behind to what I probably considered to be better players than Gen.G, and Fnatic at least looked more alive at certain points than Cloud9 did. So that's my take on it.